Buenas tardes a todos. Muy buenas tardes a todos, amigas, amigos. En instantes vamos a empezar este acto. Les vamos a rogar apagar los teléfonos celulares o ponerlos en modo silencio. Bien, tenemos muchísimo gusto de darles la bienvenida a este acto de apertura del 21º Foro Mundial de la Asociación Internacional de Escuelas de Negocios Jesuitas y la 18ª Conferencia Anual de la Asociación de Académicos de Escuelas de Negocios Jesuitas, que se lleva a cabo por primera vez en nuestro país. Integran la mesa en esta tarde, en nombre del Poder Ejecutivo, la señora Lilian Quechichian, ministra de Turismo y Deporte de la República Oriental del Uruguay, el señor Rodolfo Ang, presidente de la Asociación Internacional de Escuelas de Negocios Jesuitas, la señora Tina Facamies, presidente de la Asociación de Académicos de Escuela de Negocios Jesuitas, el padre Eduardo Casarotti, de la Compañía de Jesús, rector de la Universidad Católica del Uruguay, el doctor John Miles, decano de la Facultad de Ciencias Empresariales de la Universidad Católica del Uruguay y presidente del Foro Mundial 2015. Destacamos que este Foro Mundial ha sido coorganizado por 5 universidades jesuitas de la región: la Universidad Alberto Hurtado de Chile, la Universidad Católica de Córdoba, Argentina, la Universidad del Salvador, Argentina, y la Unicinos de Brasil, así como nuestra Universidad Católica del Uruguay. Este foro es una oportunidad para crear y fortalecer proyectos colaborativos que mejoren nuestro conocimiento sobre el rol de las escuelas de negocio jesuitas en el contexto de la economía global actual, así como también para compartir nuestras buenas prácticas de docencia, investigación y servicio, y reflexionar cómo ellas pueden potenciar en nuestros estudiantes el liderazgo y la innovación, contribuyendo a la construcción de sociedades más justas y sostenibles. A los colegas extranjeros que aportan a este foro sus conocimientos y su experiencia con generosidad, les damos la bienvenida a nuestro país, agradeciendo su presencia entre nosotros. A los colegas uruguayos que participan como expositores o concurrentes, les damos las gracias por el esfuerzo y por el apoyo. Agradecemos muy especialmente la presencia de las autoridades del Gobierno Nacional que nos están acompañando, las autoridades de las universidades coorganizadoras del foro y a los conferencistas que van a enriquecer este foro con sus aportes. Agradecemos muy especialmente el apoyo recibido de nuestros socios estratégicos, Zona América y Abengoa, y las otras organizaciones, CUTSA, Genexus, LATU y WOBI, que han colaborado para que este foro sea realidad. Para iniciar este acto vamos a escuchar a continuación las palabras de bienvenida del padre Eduardo Casarotti, rector de la Universidad Católica del Uruguay.
Muy buenas tardes. Es un gusto, es un honor poder darles a todos ustedes la bienvenida a este foro internacional. Es un placer hacerlo también en esta ciudad de Montevideo, que ustedes están visitando. Realmente agradezco su presencia de todos ustedes en medio de nosotros. Quiero, al iniciar y al abrir este 21 Foro Mundial, darle especialmente las gracias a la ministra de Turismo que nos acompaña, la señora Lilian Quechichian, que viene en representación del Gobierno Nacional, el presidente de la República, el ministro de Economía, el presidente Tabaré Vázquez, el ministro Danilo Astori, nos han enviado también sus saludos. Realmente es un gusto, señora ministra, que usted en esta tarde nos pueda acompañar. Quiero también agradecer especialmente la presencia del vicegran canciller de la Universidad Católica del Uruguay, el padre Alejandro Tilbe, provincial, que fue quien presidió nuestra Eucaristía hace unos momentos en la parroquia Tierra Santa. Quiero también darle las gracias a todos los que están presentes hoy aquí, que van a ser nuestros panelistas también. Agradecer en la mesa la presencia del presidente del IAJBS, Rodolfo Ang, bienvenido también a Montevideo, de la presidente de la CJB, la señora Tina Faca, y finalmente agradecer especialmente al decano de la Facultad de Ciencias Empresariales, el doctor John Miles, que es el que ha estado a cargo, junto con las demás universidades que coorganizan este evento, de este importante evento que se realiza en estos días en la ciudad de Montevideo. Las universidades coorganizadoras de este evento son 5 universidades de la región, con quienes hemos estado reunidos en los últimos meses trabajando activamente. Si me vengo de Chile hacia acá, es la Universidad Alberto Hurtado de la ciudad de Santiago de Chile. Muy bienvenidos todos los que vienen, que han estado trabajando. También la Universidad Católica de Córdoba, más cerca de acá, la Universidad del Salvador en Buenos Aires, y después del otro lado, en Brasil, en Porto Alegre, la Universidad del Valle de los Sinos, Unicinos. Hay en este evento 23 países representados, 50 universidades, 140 visitantes extranjeros. Realmente es un gusto y un honor darles a todos la bienvenida. Deseo que se sientan especialmente bienvenidos en la Universidad Católica del Uruguay y en esta hermosa ciudad de Montevideo. No les voy a dirigir directamente la palabra, lo voy a hacer leyendo una carta que nos envió y que me envió a mí personalmente el padre general de la compañía, el padre Adolfo Nicolás, a quien hemos invitado también especialmente a venir a este evento por distintos motivos y por la exigente agenda que ha tenido en estos meses, se ha excusado poder participar. Les voy a leer entonces la carta que el padre Adolfo Nicolás nos enviara con ocasión de este evento. La carta la tienen también disponible en español y en castellano en los bolsos que se les han entregado al inicio de este evento. Estimado padre rector, es para mí una satisfacción enviar este mensaje de apertura al 21 Foro Mundial de la International Association Jesuit Business School que se desarrolla en Montevideo, conjuntamente con el encuentro anual de College in Jesuit Business Education. Agradezco especialmente a la Universidad Católica del Uruguay, sede del evento, y a las 4 universidades coorganizadoras, UCC, Unicinos, USAL y UH, el esfuerzo realizado para llevar a esta región del mundo estos 2 importantes eventos, que aunan esfuerzos y criterios de un gran grupo de instituciones de educación superior dedicadas a la economía y a la administración y encomendadas a la Compañía de Jesús. El tema que los convoca, liderazgo e innovación para la sostenibilidad global, está en completa sintonía con los importantes desafíos que el Papa Francisco acaba de dirigir a la Iglesia y a la sociedad toda en su última encíclica Laudato Si, sobre el cuidado de la casa común. Leemos en la introducción de dicho documento que el auténtico desarrollo humano posee un carácter moral y supone el pleno respeto a la persona humana, pero también debe prestar atención al mundo natural. Unas páginas más adelante de esta misma encíclica, el Papa afirma: en algunos círculos se sostiene que la economía actual y la tecnología resolverán todos los problemas ambientales, del mismo modo que se afirma que los problemas del hambre y la miseria en el mundo simplemente se resolverán con el crecimiento del mercado. No es una cuestión de teorías económicas, que quizás nadie se atreve hoy a defender, sino de su instalación en el desarrollo fáctico de la economía. Quienes no lo afirman con palabras lo sostienen con los hechos, cuando no parece preocuparles una justa dimensión de la producción, una mejor distribución de la riqueza, un cuidado responsable del medio ambiente o los derechos de las generaciones futuras. El mercado, por sí mismo, no garantiza el desarrollo humano integral y la inclusión social. Continúa el Papa en esta última encíclica: no se terminan de advertir cuáles son las raíces más profundas de los actuales desajustes que tienen que ver con la orientación, los fines y el sentido y el contexto social del crecimiento tecnológico y económico. Hoy, pensando en el bien común, necesitamos imperiosamente que lo político y la economía, en diálogo, se coloquen decididamente al servicio de la vida, especialmente de la vida humana. Para que surjan nuevos modelos de progreso, necesitamos cambiar el modelo de desarrollo global, lo cual significa reflexionar responsablemente sobre el sentido de la economía y su finalidad para corregir sus disfunciones y distorsiones. No basta conciliar, en un término medio, el cuidado de la naturaleza con la renta financiera o la preservación del ambiente con el progreso. En este tema, los términos medios son solo una pequeña demora en el derrumbe. Simplemente se trata de redefinir el progreso, un desarrollo tecnológico y económico que nos deje un mundo mejor y una calidad de vida integralmente superior no puede considerarse progreso. Continúa entonces el Padre General. El Papa Francisco se suma así a la invitación que hicieran ya sus predecesores a eliminar las causas estructurales de las disfunciones de la economía mundial y corregir los modelos de crecimiento que parecen incapaces de garantizar el respeto del medio ambiente. Estas palabras deben ser entendidas por nuestras instituciones de educación superior como una invitación a pensar cada vez mejor la íntima relación que existe entre los pobres y la fragilidad del planeta, y a descubrir otros modos de entender la economía y el progreso. La sostenibilidad global está afectada a causa de formas inmediatistas de entender la economía y la actividad productiva y económica. La alianza entre economía y tecnología termina dejando afuera lo que no forma parte de sus intereses más inmediatos. Necesitamos formar líderes que no solo sean excelentes economistas o administradores, sino que también tengan una visión a largo plazo del desarrollo y una mirada profunda sobre la realidad, que les permitan ver la íntima conexión que vincula toda la creación. Sin convicciones arraigadas, nos quedamos en la superficie de las cosas y sin profundidad terminamos siendo incapaces de ver más allá de los intereses inmediatos que hoy predominan en la mayoría de los grupos económicos. En estas condiciones, la capacidad de decisión, la libertad más genuina y el espacio para la creatividad alternativa de los individuos se ve reducida. Frente a estos importantes desafíos, considero central el aporte y la reflexión que nuestras universidades y escuelas de negocios hacen y pueden hacer en este asunto. En particular, me parecen sumamente acertados los temas que ustedes han escogido y van a desarrollar en el evento que se inaugura en el día de hoy. Buscan asegurar una formación que permita en nuestros docentes, investigadores y egresados un liderazgo de tal calidad humana y profesional que aporte realmente a un auténtico desarrollo humano y sostenible. Para lograr esto entienden, entre otras dimensiones, que es clave innovar en el tipo de pedagogía de la enseñanza en los negocios propias de nuestras instituciones jesuitas. Se trata de ayudar a que nuestros graduados tengan una visión suficientemente amplia y profunda de los problemas que atañen al desarrollo de los pueblos y adquieran las convicciones necesarias para ser capaces de resistir a las presiones inmediatistas que hoy parecen gobernar las políticas y las decisiones económicas de distintas organizaciones y empresas. En varias oportunidades, dirigiéndome a docentes y gestores universitarios como ustedes, expresé algunas reflexiones orientadas a iluminar el tipo de liderazgo que necesitan hoy el mundo para un desarrollo sostenible. Alertaba especialmente sobre los procesos que hoy conducen a nuestros jóvenes a una percepción limitada y poco fundada de la realidad. Estoy convencido, dice el Padre General dirigiéndose a los rectores en el año 2010, de que este tipo de procesos son la causa de la falta de humanidad que hoy estamos comenzando a experimentar. Las personas pierden la costumbre de implicarse con la realidad. Es un proceso de deshumanización que puede ser gradual y silencioso, pero que es muy real. Esta globalización de la superficialidad es un gran desafío para la educación de líderes capaces de comprometer su vida en cuestiones que merezcan la pena. Necesitamos entender más inteligentemente y profundamente este complejo mundo interior, creado por la globalización, para responder así adecuadamente como educadores. En función de estas convicciones, invitaba a los rectores a que se preguntaran ¿con qué profundidad responden a las necesidades de nuestros estudiantes? ¿Cómo responden al hambre profunda de encontrar sentido a sus vidas, de encontrar fuerza y razón para esperar, en definitiva, lo que el reino de Dios puede llevar a sus vidas? ¿Con cuánta profundidad les enseñamos a ver la realidad? ¿Cómo podemos nosotros ayudarles a mirar con más profundidad el mundo real que se esconde detrás del virtual? ¿Cómo enseñarles a escudriñar esas páginas de falsas promesas, de tal modo que sean capaces de contemplar el rostro de los pobres y se sientan movidos a servirles con pasión? ¿Con qué profundidad los invitamos a pensar? Cuando miro alrededor y veo cuánto fundamentalismo y fanatismo prevalece en el mundo y los sufrimientos que causa la falta de rigor en el pensamiento, me pregunto si no deberíamos empeñarnos en buscar con mayor creatividad el modo de asegurarnos que nuestros estudiantes aprendan a pensar mejor y en profundidad. Con estos desafíos que hoy le presenta a nuestra misión universitaria, recordamos las palabras de Diego de Ledesma, que nos han inspirado en el proceso de reflexión acerca de nuestra identidad y misión. Este hermano nuestro, pionero en el apostolado universitario, aducía en el siglo XVI 4 razones para que los jesuitas trabajaran en instituciones educativas. Lo primero, porque proveen a la gente con muchas ventajas para la vida práctica. En segundo lugar, porque contribuyen al correcto gobierno de los asuntos públicos y a la apropiada formulación de las leyes. En tercer lugar, porque dan decoro y esplendor y perfección a nuestra naturaleza racional. Y en cuarto lugar, que es de suma importancia, porque son la defensa de la religión y nos guían con gran seguridad y facilidad en la consecución de nuestro fin último. Estas 4 características resumidas en la Utilitas Iustitia, Humanitas y Fidei, son el principio y fundamento de nuestra misión universitaria. Estas nacen no de un ideal de perfección, sino de la contemplación del Dios de Jesús, que quiere el bien de todos los hombres y mujeres del mundo, y que solo podemos decir que la vivimos si nuestro amor a las personas concretas nos lleva a defender sus derechos, es decir, a promover una sociedad más justa. Este sencillo descubrimiento ha cambiado nuestra perspectiva, nos ha acostumbrado a mirar el mundo desde la perspectiva de los pobres, de los que sufren la injusticia. De esta mirada teologal de la historia brota nuestra opción por la justicia, la cual es también una opción preferencial por los pobres. Deseo, finalmente, que las reflexiones y los acuerdos a los que lleguen en estos días de encuentro ayuden a nuestras instituciones a seguir avanzando los importantes desafíos que hoy tenemos planteados. Encomiendo especialmente al Señor la tarea que van a desarrollar estos días en la hermosa ciudad de Montevideo y ruego a Dios que su trabajo siga dando fruto para hacer de nuestras instituciones de educación superior mejores instrumentos al servicio de una casa común más cuidada, es decir, de un desarrollo humano más sostenible. Con afecto en el Señor, Padre Adolfo Nicolás Pachón, Superior General de la Compañía de Jesús. Muchas gracias a todos.
Agradecemos la palabra del Padre Eduardo Casarotti e invitamos al Dr. John Miles, presidente del Foro Mundial 2015, a hacer uso de la palabra.
Dear all, in the name of the 5 universities that co-organized this forum, I'll give you all a very warm welcome. And I think with the climate we have in Uruguay, will be very appreciated. As our President just said, in this forum, 140 foreigners, participants coming from 23 countries and more than 50 universities, are joining 100 Uruguayans in a demonstration of a real worldwide network of academics working for a sustainable world. And now, to help you all to know better our country, I will switch to Spanish so you can get your ears used to our language. Qué excusa, ¿no? En este foro mundial es una instancia para reflexionar y fortalecer sobre nuestra misión, la misión de las escuelas de negocios jesuitas. Reflexionar sobre el aporte específico que estamos haciendo para colaborar con la construcción del reino y con la instalación de un mundo más justo y más humano. Nuestra misión o aporte específico es la respuesta a la pregunta: ¿qué pasa si dejan de existir todas las escuelas de negocios jesuitas hoy? ¿Qué se pierde el mundo? Ahí está donde tenemos que ser muy cuidadosos. Y este aporte específico no está solamente en el desarrollo de la investigación, de las teorías, de las herramientas de gestión, de la docencia en gestión, en estrategia, en marketing, en recursos humanos. Por más necesarias e importantes que sean estas cosas para las organizaciones y empresas, no está allí nuestro aporte específico. Y no está allí principalmente por dos motivos. El primero, que si por un arte de magia mañana desaparecen todas las universidades jesuitas de los 5 continentes, van a seguir habiendo muchas universidades muy buenas, de mucha calidad, que van a seguir enseñando técnicas de gestión, investigando en marketing, en empresas, en estrategia. El mundo no se perdería eso. Y en segundo lugar, por más importantes que sean estas cosas, como ya decía, no son ellas las determinantes del desarrollo sostenible. Las últimas crisis económicas, los problemas en empresas como Petrobras o en organizaciones como la FIFA, la desigualdad creciente en la distribución del ingreso, no se deben a faltas de teoría, de investigación o de herramientas de gestión. El problema está en cómo se aplican estas herramientas y cómo se aplican estas teorías. Está en el modelo de hombre, en el modelo de la sociedad, en los valores y las éticas de quien las aplica. Y como dice el Papa Francisco en su última encíclica, Laudato Si, que a su vez acabamos de escuchar en las palabras del general, el desarrollo sostenible no es una cuestión de teorías económicas, sino de su instalación en el desarrollo fáctico de la economía. Y él también dice, para que surjan nuevos modelos de progreso sostenible, necesitamos cambiar el modelo de desarrollo global, lo cual significa reflexionar responsablemente sobre el sentido de la economía y su finalidad para corregir sus disfunciones y distorsiones. Incorporar esta reflexión en lo que hacemos, incorporar esta reflexión en nuestra investigación, en nuestra docencia, en nuestra teoría, en las herramientas de gestión que desarrollamos, ahí está nuestra misión específica. Ahí está lo que se pierde el mundo si nosotros desaparecemos. Esta es la verdadera razón de la existencia de nuestras universidades jesuitas. Si no hacemos esto, se estará enlenteciendo el movimiento hacia un mundo sostenible, donde se respete plenamente la dignidad humana y la finalidad de la acción empresarial sea realmente el bien común. Por lo tanto, en estos días de reflexión, esas son las cuestiones que tenemos que poner sobre la mesa y que tenemos que poner foco y reflexionar profundamente. El otro aspecto que me gustaría resaltar, dos nada más, es respecto a la importancia y el potencial de nuestra red. Hablando en lenguaje empresarial, formamos parte de una de las multinacionales más grandes y más antiguas del mundo. Tenemos escuelas de negocios muy buenas y de mucha calidad en la mayoría de los países de los 5 continentes. Estamos muy bien equipados para cumplir la misión que recién decía. Y sin embargo, somos conscientes, muchas veces nos sentimos así, que no estamos utilizando este potencial, que muchas posibilidades de investigación conjunta, de intercambio de docentes, de intercambio de estudiantes, de investigaciones en proyectos comunes, no los estamos haciendo tanto como podríamos hacerlo. En este foro queremos darle especial importancia a esto, especial importancia a la tarea del networking. Para ello hemos separado espacios físicos y en tiempo para que los decanos y los directivos puedan reunirse y conversar y elaborar proyectos en común. Pongámonos el objetivo entre todos de volver a nuestro lugar de origen, no solo con un montón de tarjetas de personas que hemos conocido o nos hemos reencontrado, sino con 1 o 2 proyectos concretos para poder hacer realidad el próximo año. Pongámonos ese objetivo para fortalecer nuestra red. Como todos ustedes saben, nosotros en esta región del Cono Sur tenemos una asociación de países que se llama el Mercosur. Y en el momento de su instalación, en 1991, el entonces presidente del Uruguay, Luis Alberto Lacalle, dijo una frase que a mí siempre me quedó muy adentro. Él dijo, el Mercosur es oportunidad de todo, garantía de nada. Lamentablemente, por cuestiones que no vienen al caso, tal vez los países del Mercosur no le hemos sacado todo el provecho, hemos caído más en la garantía de nada. Pero nuestras asociaciones, la Asociación de Escuelas de Negocios Jesuitas, IAJBS, la Asociación de Académicos, de colegas de Escuelas de Negocios Jesuitas, la CJBE, y este foro, son realmente oportunidad de todo. Son realmente oportunidad de todo, de contribuir realmente con nuestra docencia y con nuestra investigación al desarrollo sostenible. Son garantía de nada, depende de nosotros que lo hagamos realidad. Bueno, sin más, y agradeciéndolos a todos por estar aquí, sobre todo a aquellos que han venido de mucho más lejos, al Uruguay es difícil llegar, les agradezco mucho que estén acá, que estemos todos dispuestos a reflexionar y a trabajar por un mundo mejor, por una sociedad más justa, más humana y más sustentable. Gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias al doctor John Miles. Invitamos ahora a hacer uso de la palabra a la señora ministra de Turismo, Lilian Quechichian, para dar la bienvenida en nombre del Poder Ejecutivo.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. En nombre del Poder Ejecutivo quiero saludar especialmente al señor Rodolfo Anc, como presidente de la Asociación Internacional de Escuelas de Negocios Jesuíticas, a la señora Tina Faca, como vicepresidente de la Asociación de Académicos de la Escuela de Negocios, a Eduardo Casarotti, de la Compañía de Jesús, rector de la Universidad Católica del Uruguay, a John Miles, decano de la Facultad de Ciencias Empresariales de la Universidad Católica del Uruguay, y queremos, por supuesto, destacar en este foro mundial a las 5 universidades jesuitas que hoy nos están acompañando, a la Universidad Alberto Hurtado de Chile, a la Universidad Católica de Córdoba, a la Universidad de El Salvador y a la Unicinos de Brasil. Sean todos ustedes muy bienvenidos al Uruguay y a Montevideo. Y quiero saludar a todos los compatriotas que están aquí, sintetizándolo en una persona, el contador Enrique Iglesias, expresidente del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, es secretario general iberoamericano, un compatriota del que todos los uruguayos nos sentimos siempre muy orgullosos. Por supuesto que es para el Poder Ejecutivo una enorme satisfacción estar en este lanzamiento, en este oficial lanzamiento de este foro mundial. Como bien ustedes decían, el mundo está desafiado especialmente en sus valores, especialmente en cómo seguimos avanzando, pero cómo incorporamos a toda esa innovación, sustentabilidad y fundamentalmente lo que hacen las universidades, esa reflexión académica profunda tan necesaria en cada uno de los pasos que damos, acompañados de esos valores que para nosotros los uruguayos siempre nos ha guiado como ese legado artiguista de siempre pensar en que los más infelices sean los más privilegiados y que nada podemos esperar de nosotros mismos. Todo lo que hagamos tendrá que ver siempre con el esfuerzo de cada uno de nosotros. Y están llegando a un Uruguay y a una Montevideo que también ha ido avanzando mucho en la calidad de sus servicios, en cómo recibe a sus visitantes. Es cierto, como decía aquí, que es un poco lejos, pero hemos mejorado también mucho esa conectividad para llegar al Uruguay y les agradecemos a todos ustedes que hayan decidido elegir Uruguay y elegir Montevideo para este foro. Estoy segura que quienes participan en este foro mundial van a poder conocer, ojalá tengan un poquito de tiempo para conocer lo que el Uruguay ofrece. Ofrece también desde hace un tiempo una ruta religiosa en el Uruguay, particularmente la recorrida de la historia de los jesuitas en Colonia del Sacramento, en Calera de las Huérfanas, en Florida, en Santo Domingo de Soriano, que desearíamos mucho que tuvieran tiempo para poder conocer y si no lo pueden hacer, están invitados para que vuelvan al Uruguay. mucho valoramos como Poder Ejecutivo el aporte que ustedes puedan hacer y que puedan realizar en ese esfuerzo que siempre contiene a los diversos ámbitos. Ustedes en la invitación decían que este Foro Mundial de Liderazgo e Innovación para un Mundo Sostenible es una instancia de encuentro y de reflexión sobre buenas prácticas de docencia, investigación y servicio, con el fin de potenciar entre los estudiantes el liderazgo, la innovación y contribuir así a la construcción de sociedades más justas y sostenibles. Vaya desafío que tienen, vaya desafío que tenemos también los que diseñamos políticas públicas. Creo que ese mundo mejor, ese mundo más justo, ese mundo acompañado de valores requiere del aporte de todos y del trabajo de todos para poder conseguir un mundo en donde vivir, trabajar y disfrutar sea efectivamente algo al que puedan acceder las grandes mayorías. Sean ustedes todos muy bienvenidos al Uruguay y es un gusto saludarlos también, como lo dije al principio, en nombre del presidente de la República, el doctor Tabaré Vázquez. Muchas gracias.
Agradecemos las palabras de la señora ministra. A continuación, el presidente de la Asociación Internacional IAJBS, Rudiang, va a hacer entrega de unos presentes al padre rector, Eduardo Casarotti, y al padre provincial, Alejandro Tilbe.
On behalf of the International Association of Jesuit Business Schools, we'd like to present this very simple token of appreciation to Father Provincial, Father Alejandro Tilve, and to Father President, Father Eduardo Casarotti. Thank you, Fathers, for making this event possible, an opportunity for us to learn and to collaborate, but more especially, perhaps, the more informal part, to create good memories and friendships, and to get inspiration in mission. Thank you very much, Father.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Damos gracias a las autoridades que nos están acompañando a la mesa. Los invitamos a tomar asiento en las sillas que están reservadas en la primera fila. Vamos a invitar a las personas que se encuentran en el fondo del salón, si quieren pasar aquí delante tenemos lugar, tanto de un lado como del otro. Aquí en los laterales, por favor, pasen, así pueden apreciar la conferencia sentados. Bien, vamos a dar comienzo. Para dar comienzo a la conferencia inaugural del foro, vamos a invitar al doctor John Miles para la presentación del doctor Michael Naughton.
Para dar comienzo a nuestro foro mundial y, como les decía hace unos minutos, para comenzar a profundizar en nuestra misión de escuelas de negocios jesuitas, vamos a escuchar la conferencia del doctor Michael Naughton en relación con el documento La vocación del líder empresarial. Los líderes empresariales que queremos formar en nuestras escuelas de negocios están llamados a participar en un mundo económico y financiero contemporáneo a la luz de los principios de la dignidad humana y del bien común. El documento La vocación del líder empresarial, al cual podrán acceder a través de la página web del evento, expresa muy bien, de forma concreta y aplicable, los valores, las actitudes y el estilo que debe tener un líder empresarial que aporta al verdadero desarrollo sostenible. Ofrece un conjunto de principios prácticos que pueden guiar a los líderes, a los miembros de sus instituciones y a otros grupos de interés hacia el bien común. Este nos aporta un marco de referencia al tipo de líder que debemos formar en nuestras escuelas de negocios. Este líder que podemos poner en discusión en nuestras teorías y en nuestras clases. Por lo tanto, es una reflexión que guiará todo nuestro foro. El doctor Michael Naughton fue coordinador y coautor del libro La vocación del líder empresarial, editado por el Consejo Pontificio para la Justicia y Paz en el 2012, que fue traducido ya a 15 idiomas. Es profesor titular del Pensamiento Social Católico de la Universidad St. Thomas en Minnesota. Es profesor titular en una cátedra conjunta del Departamento de Estudios Católicos, College of Arts and Science, y de Ética y Derecho Comercial, Opus College of Business. Actualmente es director interino del Centro de Estudios Católicos, el mayor y más antiguo programa de estudios católicos en el mundo. Es también director del Instituto John A. Ryan de Pensamiento Social Católico en el Centro de Estudios Católicos. Es autor y editor de 9 libros, más de 40 artículos. Además, actualmente preside el directorio de Real Precision Manufacturing, una empresa, y es directivo del Think Things Whole, una empresa sin fines de lucro. Luego de la conferencia de Michael Naughton, habrá un momento para hacer preguntas. Le solicitamos a aquellos que quieran hacer preguntas que la hagan por escrito. Podrán encontrar los papeles para hacerlas en sus bolsos, o si no, alguno de los asistentes que está por la sala hacen la pregunta por escrito y se la entregan a ellos. Sin más, los invito a todos a disfrutar de la conferencia de Michael Naughton.
Thank you, John. It is indeed an honor to be at this conference. I have such great gratitude for the International Association of Jesuit Business Schools, working with people like Rudy Ahn, John Miles, old-time associates, Greg Elfritz, Joe Phillips. But I particularly have a great fondness for one of the founding members of this organization, Tom Bausch, who really was kind of the inspiration behind the conferences that we have developed on Catholic social thought and business education. I am utterly indebted to that man and to this organization. I'm also particularly grateful for the work of the colleagues of Jesuit Business Education, people such as Steve Porth, Joan Van Heijs, Father Spitzer, Nikki Santos, Tina Facumanes, Chris Loney, others. All of you have done such great work that has inspired much of the kind of work of mission-driven education, and I am so indebted to all the work that's been done here. My hope in this presentation is to give you a sense of this document, The Vocation of the Business Leader, and as a kind of foundational document that can address the question about what does it mean to be a Jesuit business school, Catholic business school, and how can we, in a sense, plumb the depths of that question. But before I get to it, I'd like to tell you a story that I hope will illustrate why I think this lesson of the vocation of the business leader is so important. I grew up in the south side of Chicago in a relatively blue-collar neighborhood, and one evening I was coming home, and an unfortunate event happened to me that evening. 4 teenagers decided to take turns punching on my body. I was jumped, and it was actually right in front of the Catholic church that I attended. I found out later, by the way, that this was the 4 people who did this were from a local Catholic high school, actually a Christian Brother high school, actually an Irish Christian Brother high school. I'm not quite sure what the Irish brothers were teaching them at that school, but it was not peace and love. But the next morning, our family went to Mass, and I saw one of the assailants at church. And when I came home from church, I announced to my parents that I was never, ever going into that church or any other Catholic church ever again with so many hypocrites in the church. And my mother, who was from Ireland, looked at me and she said, "Michael, there's always room for one more." Now, this was not what I wanted to hear. I was the victim. I was the peace-loving kid. But as only an Irish mother could tell her son, you too are a hypocrite. What my mother wanted me to know that morning was a very important lesson, that when we think of sin or think of vice or even hypocrisy, our first thought should be ourselves, not someone else. Father Catamanalesa, the papal household preacher, has stated that hypocrisy is one of the most widespread human vices and yet the least confessed. And this is not only true for self-righteous kids like myself, but it tends to be a particular problem for organizational leaders. Studies show over and over and over again that leaders tend to be way too optimistic about their own organizations, about themselves, and about the culture that they're fostering. Often organizations think they're better than who they are. They tend to get caught up in their own slogans, and they tend to find that their own rhetoric can sometimes only be convincing to themselves. I say that not so much to get down on ourselves, but a friend of mine, Ken Goodpasser, has a nice phrase which I find very helpful. We should make friends with hypocrisy. We should make friends with hypocrisy. Not so much in the sense of trying to simply become hypocrites, but in the sense not to be so shy of it. Because when we do that, we then are able to look at the gaps. In this conversation, I also hope that we'll look at the bridges, the good things that we're doing, but it's also important that we take a look at the things that we might have in terms of gaps. And so what I'd like to do with you this evening is to speak about the vocation of the business leader, and in particularly the good that business does that's inspired by this document, and then to ask ourselves, what does that mean for Catholic business education, for Jesuit business education? I'd like to do this in 4 steps. I'd like to talk about the context of this document called the Vocation of the Business Leader, talk about the 3 words, vocation, business, and leader, talk about the structure of the document, and then talk about the implications of this document for Catholic business education as well as Jesuit business education, maybe the general term, what we might call mission-driven business education. So first, the context. This document was released in 2012 by Cardinal Turkson in front of 2,000 business executives in Lyon, France. And it came out of a seminar that we organized with the Pontifical Council that was actually based on Caritas in Veritate, the document written by Pope Benedict XVI. The thrust of the document was this: the Catholic social tradition is one of the richest religious traditions of any religious tradition. It's not to be triumphalistic about it, but it is a religious tradition that's thought about social questions. But the problem when you relate it to business is that it's so much that business people, particularly business people, and even business educators have a hard time saying, what does that mean? And so this document was an attempt to reduce that tradition, to boil it down, initially, by the way, to only 10 pages. If you read it, it's 30 pages. Now, by the way, you may say, well, there's those academics again. But it was actually the business leader in our group who said, we need a more substantive reflection. And so that document was an attempt to, in a sense, boil this religious tradition to this smaller thing. We did a lot of consultation with Jesuit business schools. We did it with UNIAPAC, with its many different chapters around the world, and we got a whole lot of consultation to go along with it. As John mentioned, it's been translated into 15 different languages. There's a lot of challenges when you're trying to write a document like this, but let me highlight one of them, which I might call the two-ditch problem. When you're trying to write a document like this, there's the problem of simply recognizing that often, as the document says, Christians have accommodated themselves to the world, living as if God does not exist. They not only live in the world, but they have become of the world. When Christian business leaders fail to live the gospel in their organizations, their lives conceal rather than reveal the authentic face of God and religion. That is, one of the challenges we always have to face is that too often we've become assimilated to the world. We've become like the world. We did a survey one time, and one of the finance professors once said to me this. He says, if I believed in God as much as my colleagues in finance believed in the market, I'd be a mystic. Right? There is a sense that we have, in a sense, become like the world. We've separated, we compartmentalize. This is a phrase that's coming over and over by Pope Francis in his visits to Latin America. He's been pretty prophetic and pretty punchy, what he called the dung of the devil, greed, often generated by those who participate in the market. The problem, however, with dealing with this problem is that there's a tendency for people to become anti-business, anti-institutional. There's a sense that no good comes from business. And this has been a dilemma with those within the church. We'll see whether he does a better job than I. That's okay, I can still use it. And so this problem of being anti-business causes serious problems in the church that causes particular dilemmas. Now here's the thing. Within the Catholic tradition, while there is this problem, there is within the church also this great sense that business has a lot of good to do. And so the document talks about the vocation of the business leader. Let me highlight each of these three words. First, the question of vocation. The document begins. Very good, thank you. The document begins with this scripture verse from the scriptures, and it says, "From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much will be asked." Within the very inherent idea here is a logic of gift, that there has been much that's been given and there's much demanded. For business people, much has been given, and the Lord is asking for much things to be done. This logic ought to animate every business person in every business enterprise. But this logic, of course, is very different than the logic of the market. And I want to be clear here. The logic of the market is a very important logic. But as the only logic, it runs into trouble. Let me explain. The logic of the market presupposes that actually nothing is given, that things are only acquired and chosen. That is, if you don't work hard for it, it won't come your way. And because you've acquired it, it's simply about your own particular preferences. This fundamental difference between the logic of gift and the logic of the market is best captured by a Jewish sociologist, a man named Philip Reif. And this is what he says. He says, "There is no more feeling more desperate than that of being free to choose, and yet without the specific compulsion of being chosen." In the logic of the market, choice is placed as the highest value and not the content of the choice and the call to that choice. Yet choice by itself does not have the capacity to give meaning to our work. Reif captures in this brief sentence the psychological perplexity that many people are faced when they only have their choices. This perplexity is further explained by D.H. Lawrence, an English author, and he said this. He said, "Men are not free when they are doing just what they like. The moment you can do just what you like, there is nothing you care about doing. Men are free when they are obeying some deep inward voice of religious belief." Once we sever the relationship of being free to choose and being chosen, we take our choices less seriously because we individually become isolated by the self-centeredness of our choices, and eventually it is simply reduced to a price. The challenge, right, of this idea of a vocation is of critical importance. It's trying to get down to a deeper structure of reality and to get away from its superficiality. So what does that mean for business? Business is a very important institution, and how we think about business is of critical importance. And yet sometimes we tend to be too narrow about business being simply a wealth-maximizing entity. In the document it says this, "Business institutions are highly diverse, including cooperatives, multinational corporations, small entrepreneurial startups, employee-owned businesses, family businesses. Some of these businesses are publicly traded stock companies, but most are privately held. Some have revenues larger than many countries, but most are small. Some are owned by thousands of investors, others are owned by a single person or family." Business is a complex institutional form, and it takes on many forms. And what we always have to be struggling with is how do we understand that? And thirdly, the importance of leadership. In the document, it speaks about three audiences in terms of leaders. First, it wishes to speak specifically to Christian business leaders. As I mentioned, the Catholic Church has one of the most sophisticated and in-depth social traditions of any religious tradition. Faith is never merely a private reality, it's never merely emotional reality, but it has its profound social influences. And it also has a 2,000-year-old tradition that it wants to share with those people in business. But the church never simply speaks to itself. Catholicism is not a sect, and it wants to speak to all people of goodwill because it recognizes that it does not hold a monopoly on the good, and it wants to share this and learn from others as it engages in this question. And thirdly, its understanding of leadership is never elitist. From CEOs to heads of teams to those with informal influence. I would say one of the most greatest compliments you can receive in an organization is when someone says to you, "You have more influence than your title indicates." Leadership is about exercising influence. Pope Francis spoke quite a bit about that when he was here in Latin America, particularly to the poor and to those in organizations that are often on the margins. So, what does this tell us? What's the structure of this document? How can the vocation of the business leader be best understood? Let me give you one quick story about the structure that happened with writing the document. When we had our first draft of the document, which was written by the academics of the group, the practitioner, Pierre Lecoq, who was the CEO or the president of Unipac at the time and a CEO of a multinational corporation, looked at the draft and he looked at us and he says, very interesting. And of course, when someone says that to you, you're in trouble. He says, but I don't think business people will understand it. And we said, all right, what do you think business people would understand? And it was Pierre who suggested that we focus on the See, Judge, Act structure. Why? It's very interesting. See, Judge, Act is an old-time method within the Catholic tradition. It's how Thomas Aquinas defines practical wisdom. It's, of course, part of the Ignatian spiritual discernment. Very famous Ignatian spiritual writer Timothy Gallagher talks about that as being at the heart of Ignatian spiritual discernment. And so we decided to structure this document out of See, Judge, and Act. Let me say a few words on each one. Seeing. What does the business leader see? And what business leaders see is permanent whitewater. The amount of changes that are coming to business people right now is extraordinary through globalization, communication technology, financialization, cultural changes. The deal of complexity to business, these trends are creating lots of troubles, but also lots of opportunities for businesses to perform. And thus, it is very difficult for them to forecast and to have foresight as they go forward. There's a lot to be said about what we see within business, but even as we speak about what we see in business, we have to recognize that we're always making judgments. And thus, the key second thing is judging the good within business. What is the good that business does? And here, I think we have to find a creative way to speak about this. I think the document gives, a very good, although maybe not certainly final way of looking at it, to think about the institution of business in terms of three goods: good goods, good work, and good wealth. Good goods is making goods which are truly good and services which truly serve. Good work, organizing work where employees develop their gifts and talents, and good wealth, creating sustainable wealth and distributing it justly. Behind each of these goods are principles, social principles, that define what the good is about. So let me highlight each of these three goods and the principles that go along with it. And these are three goods that are, in a sense, overlapping with each other, as we'll see. So the three goods of business, good goods. What business does is it meets the needs of the world. We talk about the universal destination of material goods. How do people get the goods? They often get it through business. The basic needs of the world are achieved: food, shelter, clothing, communication, transportation, right? All of these and more are often met through business. And yet, too often, business people underestimate that they are providing the goods of the world. I sit on the board of a manufacturing company which actually probably made the hinges for these laptop computers. It's a torque technology, and it was founded by three Protestant engineers within the Twin Cities. And one of the engineers at the beginning of our conversation said to me, he says, "You know, I wish I made a pacemaker rather than a hinge. It'd be far better, wouldn't it?" And we had the conversation, but the mere fact is, what if we all made pacemakers? It doesn't work that way. It takes a lot for the world to work. It takes screws, it takes tiles, it takes woodworking, it takes electricity, it takes energy. It takes all these things to provide the goods of the world. So the idea of providing good goods, some of them may not be life-saving goods, but they are nonetheless necessary for the common good to go forward. And yet, we find that sometimes businesses overlook the needs of the poor. And thus, the second principle is solidarity with the poor. Markets can overlook these needs, largely because their margins are not very high. Certainly, the work of people like Nikki Santos, fostering on how do you address disadvantaged customers, is of critical importance. The whole question of the bottom of the pyramid has been very critical in this area. And the whole question of credit for the poor and other types of microcredit programs have been very helpful. So the idea of good goods, good work. Here, it's about organizing good and productive work and creating a good culture. At the heart, and this is really where the Catholic tradition often shines, because it has talked a lot about the importance of good work. And where does the dignity of work lie, but in what they call the subjective dimension? Let me give you an example of this. In 1931, Pius XI wrote an encyclical called Quadrage Sermano, and in there he said this. He said, "Why is it that dead matter goes into factories and comes out ennobled? Yet people go into factories and come out degraded." If you've ever been to an assembly line plant of an automobile plant, it's phenomenal. All the materials comes in, and what comes out is a brand new car. But unfortunately, people go into those factories and come out degraded. We are about creating good work, and at the heart of that is the dignity of work of those who work within it. Also within that principle is subsidiarity, which is how do you design work where you can utilize the gifts of people through appropriate authority that contributes to the organization that they have. And thirdly, the question of good wealth. You have to create wealth and you have to distribute wealth. We all know the importance of stewardship within organizations today. And it's simply this. Businesses have to create more than what's been given to them. We call that profit. And if a business doesn't create more than what's been given to them, they die. Profit is like food. Without it, you die, but you don't live for it. Profit and margins are great servants, but they're poor masters. And you have to have adequate profits and adequate margins. And yet, as soon as you create wealth, you have to distribute that wealth, which raises all sorts of questions that we need to address, particularly in our business schools, such as just wages, just prices, suppliers dealing with receivables, governments and taxes, and things of that sort. These are the three goods of business that the document talks about. Let me highlight a couple of things. One of the things that the reason why the document speaks this way is it wants to locate these principles in particular areas within business. What does this principle look like in the particular area? And yet, when you look at doing these three goods, it's very difficult. They're often in tension with each other. Doing one will sometimes have an impact on the other. And this is why, when we speak about the vocation of the business leader, we want to speak about the way the good is being done and of who that person is doing it, the actor. And what are the acts that business people need to do? And in the document, it speaks, the first act is the act of receiving. The person comes to the profoundest sense of to himself, not through what he does, but through what he accepts, not through what he achieves, but what he receives. The very most difficult part of a business person's life is often not what they do, but their ability to receive the sacraments, to receive the scriptures, to receive the Sabbath, to pray, to participate in silence. Without a deep well of reflection, of contemplation, of prayer, it is hard to see how business people or any professionals can resist the negative dimensions of financialization and of technology and other types of things. The grind of business and its frenetic pace and its challenges and disappointments will often, in a sense, reduce a person to nothing if they don't have the capacity in which to receive things. And this is why in the document it says this: if we don't get receptivity right, we'll never get work right. If we don't get rest right, we won't get activity right. If we don't get the Sabbath right, we won't get Monday right. Receptivity is a very important part of the action of a business person. And yet, the business person also needs to give, and they need to give of themselves. And so the second act to which the church calls the business leader is giving in a way which responds to what has been received. So what has been received must be given. But the better we understand what has been given to us, the better we will give in a way that develops others and ourselves. This is why I think what Jim Joseph is doing in terms of the Jesuit Case Project is so important, because it begins to describe what are the things that people do? What are the practices? What does it look like? And this is of critical importance. So in receiving this document, what does it mean for us as educational leaders? What are its implications? What matters to us? And so let me highlight 3 matters. First, and it's quite the obvious, all of us would agree that values matter. And yet here, let me raise 2 points. One of it is that we want to make sure that values pervade everything in the education that we provide for people. The danger for us in higher education, whether Jesuit, Catholic education, is that too often we will say values matter in the business ethics classes, but we will find other classes will serve as the big erasers. Sometimes a finance class, sometimes an economics class. That is, they can undo the work where we can speak of the question of ethics. The bottom line is the ethics should not be compartmentalized to a particular class, and that the whole faculty and administration needs to own the ethics agenda of the school. And yet, there's also something else. The values need to have roots, and we're always in danger of slogans in terms of the values that we have. We cannot just simply call ourselves a values-based business school. Everybody has values. The question is, what are they, and where did they come from? Let me give you an example of this that came from Václav Havel, former president of the Czech Republic. And he was speaking to a group at the United States, and he said this. He said, "Politicians may reiterate 1,000 times that the basis of the New World Order must be universal respect for human rights, but it will mean nothing as long as this imperative does not derive from the respect of the miracle of the universe, the miracle of nature, the miracle of our own existence." Havel was concerned that words such as human rights, corporate social responsibility, business ethics, social entrepreneurship are always in danger of becoming cut flowers. They become slogans that become long severed from their source. An ethic that fails to be grounded and rooted in something deeper than law or platitudes or mere generic commitment will always prone to grow cold, and like cut flowers, they may look vital and robust, but eventually they decompose because, again, it grinds away. And so how do we have an understanding of ethics that has a deep root system in terms of the logic of existence? And thus, this comes to the second part, the context matters, and the location of the business school, particularly within the Catholic university, that emphasizes the theological and interdisciplinary roots. This is of crucial importance that a business school needs to be connected to. It needs to be connected to a unity of knowledge and a dialogue of faith and reason. And yet, we also know that it is also within the context of the marketplace, the state, the larger culture, the academy, as well as accreditation standards. And this, for you business leaders, for us business leaders, is to take the full context seriously. And if we can do that, we then come to the idea that differentiation matters. We will find ourselves generating a different kind of school because we've taken the full context into serious consideration. So, what does that look like for a business school? Let me just simply highlight 4 institutional levers that every business school should be thinking about. One is mission-driven hiring. Do we hire faculty who are mission-driven, who are excellent teachers, competent researchers, lovers of the good, or do we simply merely hire disciplinary technicians? Faculty formation. Do we engage faculty on the institutional mission of our universities, or do we merely incentivize them to follow the publication route? An integrated curriculum. Do we have an integrated curriculum or a fragmented series of disciplines? And mission-based research. Do we have a critical mass of research that can address the pressing ethical questions that we have today? I know many of you deal with these items all the time, and there's certainly a lot to be said, but I know the evening's getting late, and so let me conclude with the final message. that often comes from our Pope, Pope Francis, who certainly has been speaking quite a bit. But one of the things that Francis has been doing for many of us is he's been very challenging to us, especially those of us in the church, to live authentically. In his one speech, he said this. He said, "We are victims of a trend that pushes us to the temporary. We should not be afraid of commitments that involve and affect the whole of life. In this way, our lives will be fruitful." This push to the temporary, a fear of taking in the whole of life, can lead to a serious loss of institutional pluralism in business education today. We can become fixated on measurements such as rankings, test scores, enrollments, hits in prestigious journals, all of which are important and all of which must be managed, but all of which can push us to homogeneity, of sameness, since these are the very metrics and yardsticks that everyone else is using. As leaders in Catholic and Jesuit universities, we have been given much: a vibrant university system, a rich Catholic social tradition, a profound Ignatian discernment, and a competent experience in business education. There is, of course, a risk to take in the whole of life in business education, especially at this time in our history, but it is precisely what our vocation calls us as Catholic and Jesuit universities. Thank you for your time, and God bless.
Julio. Do we have any questions or questions? Spanish. Dice, relacionando con la lógica del don y también con lo que dijo sobre recibir y dar, ¿no considera usted que en el mundo se ha puesto mucho énfasis en la agenda de derechos y no tanto en los deberes y responsabilidades que tenemos los seres humanos?
Sure, I think that's been articulated by a lot of people today. It's very interesting, the word rights. The Latin word for justice is often where we get the word right, jus. Unfortunately, particularly in the West, and particularly in the United States, we often think of rights in terms of individual rights, in terms of my rights, in terms of my claims, particularly in terms of my claims to autonomy, which actually fits very well with the discussion I talked about in terms of choice and the primacy of choice and of preference. But in the Latin, particularly within a Thomistic view of justice, it is not about my rights, but it's about right relationships. It's about how I am in right relationship with another. And thus, instead of the kind of individualistic tone that we often have with rights, within the Catholic tradition, rights is always understood within a much more communitarian sense, which, and again, complements what the question talked about in terms of rights and duties. What are my duties to those who I have in front of me?
Thank you. Here's another question. ¿Cuál debería ser la relación entre las escuelas de negocios y los trabajadores? ¿Cuál es su voz? ¿Cómo pueden dialogar?
This certainly is the message of Francis. He's had 2 meetings with the so-called popular movements, and he's telling us as a church that we have to find better ways, more structured ways, to deal with those elements that might be more concerned on the fringes of things, or at least in the, I shouldn't say fringes, but can be not within the structures of economic power. We within business schools are certainly mindful of being connected to business leaders, as we should. But I do think one of the new things that Francis is kind of pushing us to is how can we find better ways to be connected to the poor, to be connected to those who are marginalized, particularly those workers. How can those workers have greater voices than they maybe not have had always, particularly within our schools? So I think that's a real challenge, and I would suspect new things. And again, a lot of people have done this, particularly with social entrepreneurship and some other types of things. So it's not like it's not being done, but I do think we probably have to do much more than we've done in the past.
Here I have a question that says it's not to answer, it's just to make a reflection. And it says, why do you assert that assembly line workers are degraded? Many assembly line workers are very proud of their work and the kind of benefits they are getting from it. It provides food for the family and much for their lives. And I don't understand much either.
Let me tell a story of a engineer, manufacturing engineering, and he said this. He said, if we designed work for people as if they were robots, we would design more humane work for them. Well, that sounds kind of odd. An engineer would never design a job that would only use 5 or 10% of the capability of a robot. But we have tended to design jobs that only uses 5 or 10% of the capability of the human being in front of us. If you only use 5% of a robot, you would call that an inefficient job structure. But we have tended to do that with people. Now, the point that was made in the last comment, it is true, there's a lot of good things that come from assembly type of work. People can, particularly when in the days when those assembly jobs were higher value, and particularly when they were unionized, people were able to raise families. But still, there was lots of damage that went through people. One of the interesting studies that was done in the United States is that those people who tended to be in jobs with very little participation, and assembly jobs which tend to be rote and repetitive tend to be this way, asking nothing of them except for that rotation. Those people tended also to be non-participatory in government, non-participatory as citizens, non-participatory in churches, non-participatory in other areas. Work can never simply be compartmentalized. If you have bad design jobs, you will, in a sense, have implications of that bad design in the larger society.
Here I have another one. Should Jesuit business schools work on specific accreditations, standards to increase or recognize our different perspective?
Could you say that one more time?
Should we work in specific accreditation standards, not the common standards for everybody, to increase or recognize our different perspective?
I'm not very familiar with the accreditation standards. I'm just largely where my school is ASCSB. That seems to be the major standard. And I think if anybody would start to talk about other standards on top of that, I think we would go nuts. One standard seems to be enough, but maybe I'm misunderstanding the question.
And when we don't have such specificity to do another standard? You don't think so?
I think people are standard out. I think accreditation takes up so much time. It's hard to know how you would want to do more accreditation. I think, at least in my school, we're weary of accreditation. Not weary of accreditation, but it takes so much time, so much energy to become accredited by one standard. I'm having a hard time understanding why you want to do more than that.
Mm-hmm. Otra pregunta. ¿Están incorporadas las orientaciones de este documento en alguno de los planes de estudio de escuelas de negocios jesuitas que usted conozca?
Well, I was talking to John. He was telling me that they've been doing some of it here. I know Seattle University. I spoke to them a couple of years ago, and there are some faculty doing it there. Our university has been doing it within the MBA program. Seton Hall, I know, has been doing it. But I have not been able to, there's not one place where people will tell us where that's happening. But people have found that the document has tended to be accessible, whether Catholic or not. Because again, for many people, they want to see their work as more than just a job. They want to see their work more than just a career. They want to, in a sense, recognize that what their work has certain meaning. And the question of vocation is a language that's attempting to describe meaningful work, not just simply mechanistic work.
Okay, well, we're just on time. So we thank Mr. Dr. Naughton for his lovely speech, and well, that's all. Well, thank you very much for your speech.
Agradecemos a todos por su presencia. A continuación, el doctor Amílcar Peláez, el coordinador general de este foro, va a dar unas indicaciones muy importantes sobre el evento. Con respecto a mañana, les queremos informar que la misa de las 8 se va a realizar en la capilla Mater Admirabilis, es exactamente enfrente al aula magna. Amílcar, por favor.
Well, this is really an important announcement. Now the Catholic University of Uruguay invites you for a cocktail that is going to be served downstairs. Our staff is going to lead you to the place. Camaradas, señoras y señores, a Universidade Católica do Uruguai convida vocês para cocktail que vai ser servido descendo pelas escadas. A gente se vê lá. O pessoal da organização vai guiar vocês. Queridos amigos, la Universidad Católica del Uruguay los invita a un cóctel que va a ser servido en la planta baja del edificio. Así que nos vemos por allá. Muchas gracias.